The millionaire rejected his plain bride, then learned she was the hidden heiress. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. Ethan Cole was once known across New York as the man who could turn anything into gold. Every business he touched grew, every investment he made returned triple. But when his father passed away, everything changed. The will that was read in the family's marble office turned his world upside down. His father had left a single condition for Ethan to inherit the family's multi-billion-dollar corporation he had to marry before his 30th birthday. And the bride had to be someone approved by the Cole family. No exceptions, no negotiations. Ethan had no interest in marriage. He believed in mergers, not emotions. Love, in his mind, was a weakness that destroyed good judgment. But as the board began to whisper about replacing him, and investors questioned his leadership, the deadline loomed like a storm. That was when his mother, Eleanor Cole, stepped in. Calm, elegant, and traditional, she said she had already found the right woman, someone kind, modest, and trustworthy. Her name was Clara Evans, the quiet girl who had grown up in the Cole estate, raised by the family's gardener after being orphaned as a child. Ethan barely remembered her. To him, she was just a shadow who used to bring tea to his study or water the flowers by the fountain. But to his mother, Clara was the kind of woman who could restore decency and warmth to a household that had long forgotten the meaning of kindness. "I will not marry a servant's daughter," Ethan said coldly, standing by the window that overlooked the city skyline. "This is absurd." His mother's voice trembled for the first time. "She is not just a servant's daughter, Ethan. She has lived here, worked here, and cared for this family more sincerely than anyone else ever has. Sometimes, the heart that looks the simplest hides the purest loyalty." Ethan's jaw tightened. He could not argue with the will. The company's lawyers had confirmed that without a legal marriage, his father's shares would be frozen and control would pass to the board. The empire he built with sleepless nights and ruthless decisions would slip away. And so, with no other choice, he agreed. The wedding was arranged within days. There was no romance, no laughter, no celebration, only formal vows and the soft hum of the rain outside the chapel. Ethan stood in a black tailored suit, his expression carved in stone. Clara wore a plain ivory gown with no jewelry, no makeup, and eyes that held more grace than fear. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan barely touched her hand. The flash of cameras outside the chapel caught his cold expression, and the tabloids soon labeled her the millionaire's plain bride. To everyone watching, it was a perfect arrangement, a story of power and practicality. But beneath that calm surface, something fragile and fateful had already begun. That night, as the rain fell against the windows of the Cole mansion, Clara sat quietly in the guest room that had become her new home. She placed a small photo on the nightstand, an old picture of the garden where she once played as a child. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "Father, I kept my promise. I came back, but not to destroy, only to make things right." Across the hallway, Ethan looked at the same storm through another window, unaware that the woman he had just married carried a past that was tied to the darkest secret of his family. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, the ice clinking like broken memories. "This is just business," he told himself. "A contract, nothing more. But destiny has its own rules. And sometimes it begins with a signature that binds two souls who were never meant to meet until the world forces them to." That was how their story began, with a contract signed not in love, but in necessity, and a secret waiting beneath every heartbeat. The first morning after, the wedding felt colder than the rain that had blessed their vows. The grand Cole mansion stood silent, its marble halls echoing with the sound of distance between two strangers now bound by law. Ethan left early, as always, his driver waiting by the black sedan at precisely 7. He did not say goodbye. He did not even glance toward the woman who would become his wife. Clara watched him from the second-floor balcony, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The sunlight caught the faint gold in her hair, but her eyes remained still. She had expected nothing more from him. This marriage was never meant to be a story of love. It was a bridge between duty and survival, and she had accepted that. Downstairs, the staff whispered in corners. To them, the new Mrs. Cole was too ordinary, too plain, too calm for a man like Ethan. Some pitied her, others judged her. But none understood her quiet strength or the reason she never reacted to their words. She had lived her entire life surrounded by power, yet she had never let it define her. When Ethan returned that evening, his voice was clipped and formal. "You may stay in the East Wing. I travel often, so I will not be home much. My assistant will handle your allowance. I expect you to attend the family dinner this Friday for appearance's sake." Clara nodded politely. "Of course." He looked at her for the first time since the ceremony. She wore a simple cream sweater and an old pendant around her neck, a small silver locket shaped like a leaf. He found it oddly familiar, but quickly dismissed the thought. To him, she was still the same quiet girl who belonged to another world. Over the next few days, life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Ethan buried himself in work, fighting to maintain his company's reputation after his father's passing. Clara spent her days in the garden, restoring the old greenhouse that had been abandoned for years. The scent of jasmine soon returned to the air, softening the mansion's coldness. One afternoon, Eleanor Cole visited the greenhouse and smiled. "You have brought life back into this place, dear. My husband always said this house needs warmth. I am glad you are here." Clara lowered her gaze. "Thank you, Mother Cole. It is the least I can do." Eleanor touched her hand gently. "You remind me of someone I once knew, someone who believed that even broken things could bloom again." From a distance, Ethan watched them. He could not explain why that scene unsettled him. His mother's laughter sounded lighter when Clara was near, as if the house itself had begun to breathe again. At dinner that evening, his business partner, Isabella Moore, joined them. Isabella was everything. Clara was not sophisticated, confident, and well aware of her charm. She looked at Clara with polite curiosity, then turned to Ethan with a smile that spoke of old familiarity. "So, this is the famous Mrs. Cole," Isabella said smoothly. "You caused quite the stir in the papers. No one expected you to choose someone so understated." Ethan's fork paused midair. "Enough, Isabella." Clara simply smiled. "It is all right. Appearances can be misleading." For a brief moment, their eyes met Clara's calm, Isabella's sharp, and Ethan saw a quiet dignity in his wife that he had never noticed before. It irritated him. He was not used to being the one unsettled. Later that night, as he passed the study, he saw the light under the door of the east wing still glowing. He opened it slightly. Clara sat by the window, reading an old notebook filled with sketches of plants and formulas for soil composition. "You are working late," he said, his tone neutral. She looked up. "I am trying to revive the hydrangeas near the fountain. They have been neglected for too long." He almost smiled but caught himself. "Do as you wish. Just keep out of company matters. That world is not for you." Clara's voice was gentle. "Perhaps. But sometimes, what is dying just needs a little care to live again." Ethan said nothing. He left, but her words lingered like the faint scent of jasmine that followed him down the corridor. For the first time, he wondered if he had underestimated her. And somewhere deep inside, the walls he built around his heart walls made of pride, reason, and logic began to show their first invisible cracks. The following week passed quietly, though nothing in the Cole mansion ever stayed silent for long. Ethan spent most of his days buried in board meetings and late-night calls, while Clara continued tending the gardens and organizing the household with a quiet grace that even the staff had begun to respect. The air around her seemed to calm every space she entered, and though Ethan would never admit it aloud, he noticed. One morning, as Ethan prepared to leave for the office, he found his mother in the kitchen speaking with Clara. The smell of fresh bread filled the room. Eleanor laughed softly, holding a plate in her hands. "You made this yourself? I cannot remember the last time someone baked in this house." Clara smiled. "It was my father's recipe. He used to say that bread baked with patience will never burn." Ethan's eyes flickered briefly toward her. He wanted to say something, but the words never came. He simply picked up his coat and left. Yet all day at work, the sound of her voice stayed in his mind, soft, steady, and unfamiliar in a house that had known only formality and control. At Cole Group headquarters, tension was rising. A major contract with an international investor had fallen apart. Ethan's executive assistant whispered that the rival company, Evans Holdings, had underbid them with suspicious precision, as if someone inside Cole Group had leaked their proposal. The board demanded explanations. Ethan clenched his jaw. Find out who has been talking. By evening, exhaustion weighed on him. He returned home late to find the mansion dimly lit, except for the glow from the greenhouse. Curiosity pulled him there. Inside, Clara knelt beside a tray of seedlings, her hands covered in soil, a small lamp illuminating her face. He stopped at the doorway. It is nearly midnight. She turned slightly, smiling. These will bloom soon. They just need the right balance of light and water. It is strange, is it not? Even the most stubborn roots can grow again if you give them time. Her words caught him off guard. He realized she was not talking about flowers. He stepped closer, watching the small plants sway under the lamp. You care about things most people would give up on. I suppose someone has to, she replied quietly. Not everything that seems hopeless truly is. Something stirred in him, a warmth he did not want to feel. He cleared his throat and changed the subject. There will be guests at dinner tomorrow, a few board members, and Isabella Moore. You will attend. Clara nodded. Of course. The next evening, the dinner unfolded in polished luxury crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and conversation sharp enough to cut through the air. Isabella sat close to Ethan, laughing easily, her red dress shimmering under the chandelier. She glanced at Clara with that same practiced smile that hid 1,000 judgments. So, Mrs. Cole, Isabella began, her tone light but loaded. I heard you studied horticulture. That is quite different from finance. Clara met her gaze calmly. Yes, but both require understanding growth and what can destroy it. Ethan almost choked on his wine. Isabella's smile tightened for a moment before she laughed softly. How poetic. Later that night, as the guests departed, Ethan found himself lingering in the dining room. Clara was collecting glasses, her movements graceful and unhurried. You handled yourself well, he said finally. Isabella can be difficult. Clara looked at him, her expression unreadable. She loves you, does she not? He hesitated. She used to. Or perhaps she loved the idea of winning. Winning what? Ethan paused. Control. Pride. Maybe me. I do not know anymore. She nodded slowly. Then I hope she learns that control and love rarely live in the same house. All the He stared at her, unsure what to say. Every word she spoke seemed to strike deeper than intended. As she turned to leave, something fell from her pocket, a folded piece of paper, worn with time. Ethan bent to pick it up, but stopped when he saw the handwriting. It was his father's. The signature at the bottom was faint but unmistakable. Clara's eyes widened as she quickly reached for it. Please, that is personal. Ethan froze. His father's name, her silence, and the growing rumors of Evans Holdings, it all collided in his mind. What is that? He demanded softly. She hesitated. A reminder of someone I once lost. He handed it back, but the unease had already taken root. That night, as he stood by his office window overlooking the city lights, Ethan replayed every moment, her calmness, her confidence, her secrets. For the first time, the thought crossed his mind. Who exactly is Clara Evans? And somewhere deep inside, a storm began to gather. The next morning arrived with a cold wind sweeping through the tall glass windows of the Cole Group Tower. Ethan stood in his office staring at a stack of documents that should have brought him relief, quarterly profits, projections, signatures, but none of it mattered. His thoughts kept circling back to that piece of paper he had seen in Clara's hand the night before, his father's signature, her trembling voice, her silence. When Isabella walked in, she noticed his distraction immediately. Rough night? She asked, with a teasing smile, dropping a folder on his desk. Ethan barely looked up. What is this? Something you will want to see. Isabella leaned forward, lowering her voice. I hired a private investigator after the Evans Holdings bid came in. I had a feeling someone inside the company was leaking information. Guess what he found? She opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, photos, and a financial report. On the screen of her tablet, she showed him a series of transfers, small but regular, from the Cole family's estate account to a charitable foundation under the name E. Evans Foundation. Ethan frowned. That foundation belongs to our competitors. Exactly, Isabella said. And the sender's name on several transactions is a former employee here, Benjamin Hale. The same man who, according to public records, was your family's longtime housekeeper. The same man who raised your wife. Ethan's face hardened. You are saying Clara is involved in this? Isabella shrugged slightly. I am saying it looks suspicious. She lives under your roof. She has access to household information. These transactions began the same month she married you. If she is not working with Evans Holdings, then why are their accounts connected? He picked up one of the documents. The numbers blurred in his vision. The pattern was too precise to ignore. That evening, when Ethan returned home, the mansion felt unusually quiet. He found Clara in the library sorting through old ledgers and letters. The fireplace flickered behind her, casting light across her face. "Where did you get that letter you dropped last night?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "It was my father's, I told you." Ethan stepped closer. "Your father's or mine?" Confusion clouded her eyes. "What are you implying?" He placed the file on the desk. "These are financial transfers from our household accounts to the Evans Foundation, a foundation tied directly to my company's biggest rival. All sent by Benjamin Hale, the man who raised you." Clara's voice softened. "Benjamin helped me through school. He only wanted to repay a debt to my family. There was nothing more." Do not lie to me," Ethan snapped. "You came into this house with a secret. I should have known. You never belonged here." Her eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "You are angry because it is easier than being afraid. But the truth will not change just because you shout." "Then tell me the truth," he demanded. "Who are you really? Why do these records tie you to the people trying to destroy everything my father built?" She hesitated, the pain in her chest visible. "Ethan, please, not like this." But he was already walking away, fury and betrayal mixing in his veins. The next morning, the tabloids exploded with headlines. Coal Empire under investigation for corporate espionage. Anonymous sources claimed that insider data had been leaked through domestic channels. Isabella sent him another message. "It is spreading fast. You need to act." By the time he reached home, reporters had gathered outside the gate. Inside, Clara stood by the staircase, pale and silent, as camera flashes lit up through the windows. He pointed toward the door. "You wanted this, did you not? The attention, the power, the revenge for your precious Evans Holdings." Her face broke for the first time, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes. "You truly believe I would destroy you?" "I believe what the evidence shows," he said coldly. Clara lowered her head. "Then there is nothing left to say." She removed the wedding ring from her finger and placed it on the table between them. "If you need someone to blame, let it be me. But one day, Ethan, you will see what you have thrown away." Without another word, she walked toward the door. Rain had begun to fall again, just as it had on the night of their wedding. The sound followed her steps as the door closed behind her. Ethan stood alone in the echoing silence of the mansion, the ring glinting faintly under the chandelier. For a long moment, he felt something he had not known in years: fear. Fear that the woman he had rejected might have been the only truth left in his world of lies. The following days unfolded like a storm that would not end. News outlets ran headlines calling it the coal scandal, and Ethan's name was mentioned on every financial program across the country. Words like insider leak, fraud, and family betrayal filled the air. Investors withdrew, partners hesitated, and the company's stock dropped faster than it ever had before. Inside the mansion, the silence was unbearable. Clara's absence left the halls hollow. Every morning, Ethan still expected to hear her soft steps in the corridor or the sound of the greenhouse door opening. Instead, there was only the echo of a house that had lost its warmth. He tried to bury himself in work, but every report felt heavier than the last. The board demanded answers. Some suggested that Ethan step down temporarily to calm public reaction. For the first time, the man who had once controlled everything could no longer control anything at all. One evening, as he returned home from another grueling meeting, his mother's nurse met him at the door. "Mrs. Cole collapsed again, sir. The doctor says her heart is weaker." Ethan's chest tightened. He rushed to her bedside. Eleanor lay pale and still, her breathing shallow. Machines beeped softly around her. She looked fragile, almost transparent beneath the sterile hospital light. He took her hand and whispered, "Mother, please, you have to wake up." Her eyelids fluttered for a moment. Her lips moved weakly, forming a single word. "Clara." Ethan froze. The name echoed in his mind like a prayer. "She was a light in this house," his mother murmured faintly. "Do not lose her the way I lost my kindness. Olive." He felt his throat tighten, but before he could speak, she slipped back into unconsciousness. For hours, Ethan sat by her bed, the memory of his mother's words burning in his mind. When he finally returned home, he opened Clara's old room. The faint scent of jasmine still lingered. On her desk lay a single notebook filled with sketches of plants, notes about soil, and a few pages of poetry written in neat handwriting. One line stopped him cold. Even when the garden burns, the roots remember where the rain once fell. He closed the notebook slowly, realizing that for the first time, he could not tell whether he was the victim or the cause of his own ruin. The next morning, Benjamin Hale's name reappeared in the news, the former Cole family employee who had supposedly sent money to Evans Holdings. Ethan tried to contact him, only to learn that the man had died in a car accident days earlier. The only clue left behind was an unfinished letter found in his apartment, addressed to Ethan Cole. The letter was smudged by rain and oil stains, but one sentence remained legible. "The girl you married is not your enemy, Ethan. She carries the truth you refuse to see." Ethan gripped the paper tightly. "Truth?" he whispered. "What truth?" He needed answers, but every path led to Clara, the woman he had driven away. By the end of the week, the Cole Group had lost nearly a third of its market value. The board called an emergency meeting and forced Ethan to resign as acting chairman. He left the tower that day to the sound of reporters shouting questions and cameras flashing like lightning. That night, he returned to the hospital. His mother was still asleep, her heartbeat fragile but steady. Ethan sat beside her, his voice breaking in the quiet. "Mother, you were right. I thought I was protecting our family. I thought I was defending Father's legacy. But I destroyed everything he built, and the only person who ever tried to protect me." He looked out the window, where the city lights shimmered like distant stars. "Clara, where are you?" he whispered. "If there is any mercy left in this world, let me see you again." The nurse entered and adjusted the monitor. "She keeps saying her name," she said softly, "even in her sleep." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the rain began to fall again, steady and endless. Each drop struck the glass like a heartbeat, a reminder that time was moving forward, but love, once broken, did not wait. For the first time, Ethan understood what it meant to lose everything. Not just power, not just status, but the one person whose truth could have saved him if only he had listened. Weeks passed and the once mighty Cole empire had become a fading name in the newspapers. Ethan no longer went to the office. His phone rarely rang, and when it did, it was only reporters or creditors asking questions he had no strength to answer. The mansion that once hosted lavish gatherings now felt like a mausoleum, every corner echoing with what used to be. His mother remained in the hospital, her condition worsening with every sleepless night. Ethan visited her daily, bringing flowers that never seemed to live long enough to bloom. The nurses whispered that she spoke only one word in her dreams, Clara. Every time he heard it, something inside him broke a little more. One evening, as the autumn light faded through the blinds, Ethan sat beside her bed and held her hand. "Mother, can you hear me?" he asked softly. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a brief moment, she opened her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, "you must find her. She did nothing wrong." "Find who?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Clara," she breathed faintly. "She was the daughter I never had." Tears filled his eyes. "Mother, please, you need to rest." Her lips curved into the smallest smile before she slipped back into stillness. The monitor beeped steadily, but the sound felt like a countdown. Ethan stayed there long after the nurses dimmed the lights. When he returned home that night, the rain had started again, the same kind of rain that had fallen on their wedding day, the same rain that had carried her away from his life. He walked through the empty halls, stopping by the door of her old room. Everything remained untouched. The scent of her still lingered, jasmine and old paper. On the nightstand was the notebook she had left behind, the one filled with garden notes and poems. As he turned the pages, a small photograph slipped out. It showed Clara standing beside Benjamin Hale in front of the old coal greenhouse, both smiling under the sunlight. On the back of the photo was a date from 15 years ago, the year of the Evans fire. Ethan frowned. He remembered the tragedy vaguely, the rival businessman whose house had burned to the ground, the rumors of corruption, and the lawsuit his father had buried with silence. He could not shake the thought. Why would Clara's guardian, Benjamin, have a connection to the Evans family so far back? And why had he sent money to the Evans Foundation all these years? The next morning, Ethan went through the family archives stored in the basement. Dust covered the shelves. After hours of searching, he found a folder marked Evans Holdings Settlement Confidential. Inside were documents signed by his father, including one that confirmed that Cole Group had indeed taken over Evans' assets after the fire. A handwritten note at the bottom made Ethan's blood run cold. Debts cleared, child unidentified, presumed lost. He sat there for a long time, unable to breathe. The pieces started to fall into place. Clara had not been a spy nor a manipulator. She had been the child left behind, the daughter of the man his father had ruined. When Ethan finally rose, the weight of realization crushed him. He stumbled up the stairs and into the living room, where his mother's favorite photograph hung the Cole family standing proudly in front of their estate. He looked at his father's face and whispered, "What did you do?" His phone buzzed on the table. It was the hospital. The voice on the other end was gentle but firm. "Mr. Cole, I am sorry. Your mother passed away peacefully a few hours ago." The words hit him like glass shattering. He dropped the phone, his knees giving out beneath him. The rain outside turned harder, and thunder rolled across the sky. In that moment, Ethan Cole, the man once feared in boardrooms and envied in magazines, broke completely. He had lost his company, his reputation, his mother, and the only woman who had ever loved him for who he truly was, not for what he owned. He walked out into the rain without an umbrella, letting it soak through his suit. His reflection in the puddle looked like a stranger. "Clara," he whispered into the storm, "I was blind, I was cruel, and now there is no one left to forgive me." Lightning flashed in the distance, and for the first time in years, Ethan fell to his knees, not as a millionaire, not as a leader, but as a man finally stripped of everything except regret. Somewhere in that cold night, a single truth settled deep in his heart: love built on pride always ends in ashes. But perhaps, if he could find her again, there might still be a way to turn ashes into light. The morning after his mother's funeral arrived gray and hollow. The mansion, once filled with voices and movement, now felt like a ghost itself. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at a framed photo of his mother smiling beside Clara in the garden. The same garden that now lay silent, its flowers withered from neglect. For days, he had gone through his mother's letters, hoping to find something that could help him understand what she had seen in Clara, why she had loved her like a daughter. Finally, in one envelope dated 2 years earlier, he found a clue. It was addressed to a lawyer in Boston and mentioned a trust fund linked to the Evans family name. The note was short: "If the girl ever discovers who she is, protect her. She deserves the truth." That single line was enough. Ethan packed a small bag and left the mansion for the first time in weeks. The drive to the city blurred into miles of rain and silence. When he arrived at the Cole Group headquarters, reporters swarmed the entrance. Cameras flashed, questions fired, but he walked through them without a word. Inside the boardroom, a press conference was already underway. On the screen behind the podium, the name Evans Holdings glowed in gold. A voice echoed through the speakers, calm, clear, and unmistakable. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clara Evans, acting chairwoman of Evans Holdings." Ethan froze in the doorway. There she was, standing tall, graceful, and composed in a white tailored suit. Her hair was pinned back neatly, her posture steady. The woman who once lived quietly in his shadow now stood before the entire business world as a leader in her own right. The audience murmured as she continued. "Our company wishes to announce a settlement proposal that will close all disputes between Evans Holdings and Cole Group. We do not seek revenge, we seek reconciliation. My father once said that integrity is not about winning, but about doing what is right, even when it costs you everything." Ethan's throat tightened. The sound of her voice brought back every memory, every moment he had chosen pride over love. When the press conference ended, he found himself waiting by the marble staircase as Clara walked out, surrounded by her assistants. When she saw him, she stopped. The room fell into silence. "Clara," he said quietly, "I needed to see you." "And Rudy?" Her eyes softened for a moment, then steadied. "You should not be here, Ethan. This is not your world anymore." He took a slow breath. "You are right. I destroyed everything that once was mine. But you built something better from what I broke." She looked away, her voice almost a whisper. "I did not build it to prove you wrong. I built it because someone had to bring light where there had been too much darkness." He nodded, the weight of regret visible in his eyes. "Your light was always there. I was just too blind to see it." For a heartbeat, she seemed to waver, the distance between them filled with everything they had lost. Then she turned slightly, her tone firm but kind. Go home, Ethan. Heal what you can. The past does not have to define what comes next. As she walked away, her reflection disappeared into the rain-streaked glass doors. Ethan stood motionless, realizing that he had met her not as the woman he once owned, but as the woman he would forever admire, the hidden heiress who had forgiven him without needing to say the words aloud. Outside, the rain began again, but this time, it felt like the beginning of something cleansing the quiet promise of redemption. A quiet winter settled over New York, the kind that softened the city into a hush of snow and gray skies. Weeks had passed since Ethan last saw Clara at the press conference. He had returned to the mansion not as a master, but as a man learning to live with silence and consequence. He no longer kept the staff. He no longer kept the prestige. He simply kept the lessons. Every morning, he walked through the garden she once nurtured, touching the frost-kissed branches and remembering how her hands had coaxed life from dried soil. Some days, he fought regret. Other days, regret fought him harder. But each day, he tried to be better than the man he had been. That was the promise he whispered to the wind each dawn. Then, one evening, while sorting through old storage crates in the garden shed, he noticed a wooden box that had belonged to Benjamin Hale. Inside were uniforms, faded photographs, and one sealed envelope marked in familiar handwriting, "For Ethan Cole, if truth is ever needed." His heart pounded. He broke the seal. Inside was Benjamin's unfinished letter, but now he held the original, not the damaged copy he had found before. The message was clear, steady, and devastating. "Ethan, if you are reading this, it means the pain has finally reached you. The girl you married is not your enemy. She is the child of the man your father wronged. He saved my son's life years ago, and when tragedy fell upon him, I saved his daughter in return. I raised her in your home because I believed that in the place where she lost everything, she might someday heal. Do not punish her for truths she did not choose to inherit. Protect her even if you never earn her forgiveness." A folded note slipped out, a tiny scrap that looked like a piece torn from a hospital record. Evans estate survivor, female, approximately age 6. Ethan closed his eyes. The world tilted. The air felt thin. Everything made sense now. The charity payments, Benjamin's loyalty, Clara's silence, her gentleness bordering on sorrow. She had been breathing in the ruins of his legacy long before he ever learned her name. He pressed the letter to his chest. "Benjamin, Clara, I was wrong about both of you," he whispered. "I was wrong about everything." That night, Ethan stood by the old fountain where Clara once nurtured hydrangeas. Snowflakes drifted through the air, resting on the frozen petals she had fought so hard to revive. He knelt beside them, brushing away ice as though his touch could bring them back to life. "I should have protected you," he said softly, voice trembling. "Not the company, not my pride, you." He stayed there long after dusk, his breath freezing in the winter air, until the first hint of moonlight touched the garden. And in that quiet glow, the truth settled not as a wound, but as an awakening. The next morning, he packed a simple suitcase. Not expensive suits, not silk ties, only quiet clothes, a notebook, and the letter from Benjamin. He left the mansion keys with the security guard and walked out through the iron gates without looking back. There was nothing left for him there. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt the faint beginning of peace. Ethan Cole, once a man defined by wealth, now chose a different kind of richness. Truth, humility, and the hope of earning forgiveness, even if he had to spend a lifetime seeking it. With each step away from the estate, the snow fell harder, but his heart felt lighter. Because, somewhere in the world, a woman with a past intertwined with his was still breathing, and perhaps, somewhere along the winding road, he might find her again, not to demand redemption, but to offer his own. Spring arrived quietly that year, carrying the scent of renewal through the air. The gardens of the Cole estate, once lifeless, had begun to bloom again under the care of new hands. Ethan no longer lived there. Months had passed since he walked away from the mansion and the empire that once bore his name. He had settled in a small coastal town a few hours north of the city, where the sound of the ocean replaced the noise of boardrooms. With the money left from selling his remaining shares, he opened a small community foundation, one that provided scholarships for orphan students studying business and environmental science. It was not an empire, but it was honest work. And for the first time, Ethan felt the kind of peace that wealth could never buy. Every morning, he would read letters from students he helped, their words full of gratitude and hope. Yet one envelope, sealed in elegant handwriting, caught his attention. The sender's name stopped his breath. Clara Evans. He hesitated for a long moment before opening it. Ethan, I heard about the foundation you started. I do not know if this letter will ever reach you, but I wanted to thank you not for what you have done, but for who you have become. Benjamin always said that healing begins when truth is no longer hidden. You found the truth, and that is enough. I hope you are well, Clara. He read the words again and again, his hands trembling slightly. Then, as if guided by instinct, he packed the letter and a single notebook into his bag and took the first train back to New York. The city looked different now, gentler, slower, no longer a battlefield. He found himself walking to a familiar place. The renovated garden at the Cole Mansion, now open to the public as part of the new Evans Foundation initiative. Children played near the fountain, their laughter mixing with the sound of running water. And there she was, standing near the hydrangeas that once marked the edge of their story. Clara turned when she felt his presence. For a moment, neither spoke. You kept the garden alive, he said quietly. She smiled. It was never really mine. I just made sure it remembered how to grow. Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft. I found Benjamin's letter. I know everything now. About your father, about what my family did, and I am sorry, not with words, but with every choice I make from now on. Clara looked at him, her eyes warm yet calm. You do not owe me an apology, Ethan. You owed it to yourself. You finally let go of the man who could not love because he feared losing control. He nodded, emotion rising in his throat. I lost everything before I learned what love really was. But you never stopped being the light that showed me. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper, the marriage contract they once signed in haste. She placed it gently in his hands. I kept it all this time, she said softly. It started as a condition, but maybe it can end as a promise. Ethan unfolded the paper, then tore it in half with steady hands. No more contracts, he said. Just truth. They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind carrying the scent of new blossoms through the garden. Finally, Clara smiled. Then let us start again, not as what we were, but as who we have become. Ethan took her hand, the warmth of her touch grounding him in the present. Around them, the garden bloomed brighter than ever, a living testament that even from ashes, love can take root again. For the first time, their story did not end with loss. It ended with forgiveness and the quiet miracle of a second chance.